Welcome to the Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one and only Mr. Steve Herzig. How are you, sir?
I am doing great, Chris. We are doing this podcast right now, but last week we have news about our cups.
We have news about our cups.
A mug on a mug.
A mug on a mug. We got great news about that coming up. We've got. We're actually starting a whole new series today because Revelation is done. We're actually going to.
Revelation is done.
We're done.
That's
Revelation.
correct.
Yeah.
God has given no further revelation. Genesis to Revelation, done.
It's done. Hold on a minute. Welcome in. Hey, thanks so much for being with us. We're starting a new series today. It's going to be a quick one, but you know, Steve grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home, and so we asked him to bring some of his tchotchkes in. Would you call them tchotchkes?
I call them my bag of tricks.
Bag of tricks.
That's right. And that's no disrespect. It's a bag. In fact, Chris, I know you've been to Israel, and when you get by communities, Misharim and other places like that,
the ultra-Orthodox, yeah.
You'll see people, the men particularly, running around with various bags like this. Mm-hmm. They're decorated differently, but it has their things that they need for worship.
That's right.
And they carry it with them. You can't carry it on Shabbat. You'll leave it at the synagogue and get there and use it. But otherwise, you carry it home with you, and it's got all your stuff.
Fantastic. So we're going to go through your, as you call it, bag of tricks. But in Hebrew there, in the Star of David, it says Tallit. Is that right?
That's right.
Yep.
That's what we're going to talk about first.
And so all of that actually comes from an article that was recently published on our blog at the FOI blog.
Shout out to our blog. We have all kinds of bloggers. When I first heard the word blogger, I thought, is that a disease? Is it a blowhard? What is a blogger?
Yeah, nope.
And then there's vlogger.
Blogger.
What is this?
Well, one is just people writing, and the other is people videoing. So you got a video blog, and you have just a regular blog. There's a technical term to it too, and I don't know exactly what it is.
So what's more popular, blogging or vlogging?
Oh, I think they both are just as equally popular.
What's your preference?
I don't. I always have to do it for Friends of Israel, so I don't really even know. Like, it's not like I do.
So you vlog and blog.
There's, when we do our video news and whatnot, that's
vlogging.
It's video, like it's professional news, but like I think it falls within the vein of vlogging. But I take what we do here at the Jew and Gentile podcast, and I convert them into what's called YouTube Shorts and Facebook Reels. We don't use TikTok. But they're little vlogs. They're little tiny, we take little quips of what we do here so that people can get a taste of the podcast.
Gotcha. So I never knew that.
You've been vlogging.
I've been blogging without writing. They just took it's great. Hey, Steve, you're on.
Yeah.
What did I do? Nothing.
Here you are. You're already blogging and vlogging, and you don't even know it.
I don't even know.
Isn't that a nice life?
It's great.
Oh, you're a professional blogger, huh, Steve? Well, actually, the blog took Steve's chapter or section from his book, Jewish Culture and Customs, which we want to feature, and we will feature in our show notes so that you can purchase his book, Jewish Culture and Customs. It was actually at one point 2 books. It was called Jewish Culture and Customs, and then more Jewish Culture and Customs.
That's right.
And it's a lot of the stories of you growing up in an Orthodox Jewish home, everything from the Feast of Israel to what we're going to be looking at today, the various elements of prayer for Jewish individuals, and they cram it all into a one book now, and so you can get 2 for the price of 1. It's such a deal, as you would say.
Such a deal.
And so we'll put a link to that if you'd like to purchase Steve's book, Jewish Culture and Customs, if you'd always wanted to learn more about Jewish culture and customs. So anyway, this is a section that comes from his book. We'll be looking into that. We've got,
but I got bad news, Chris.
What's that?
I do have bad news. We've been talking about my bobblehead and my
behind you, other way.
Oh, it's my other way. Here he is, my bobblehead. And I was looking for. He's got a smile on his face, but he's kind of sad. Yesterday, you texted me. You should. I don't know if you could. You have that picture or not. That's me. But you texted me your bobblehead. It came to your house. And does it look exactly like you? And this morning, Chris comes in, bupkis.
Bupkis. I forgot it.
He forgot the bobblehead. So my bobblehead is still lonely.
Steve is very
just
Steve,
the Jew, no Gentile.
Steve as a boss could have laid into me. He could have said, "You forgot about it. You're fired. Get out of here." But I will say, this morning I was getting 4 kids ready for school, and it wasn't until not school, for camp. It wasn't until I dropped them off and I was driving down the highway, I go, I forgot the bobblehead. I was trying to remind myself all morning to get it. So anyway, we will feature the bobblehead at another time.
Yep.
You're getting ready to travel, too.
I am getting ready to travel. I'll be headed to see my mother, 99-year-old mother. I'm looking forward to that.
Blanche.
Then I'm going to be in Chicago, see my son. Then I'm going to be in Wisconsin, Lake Geneva Youth Camp, and I'll see my daughter and 2 grandkids and son-in-law. And then we have our prophecy conference, which has changed this year, Chris. In the past, we've been at Winona Lake, and I've been with FOI long enough where it started on a Saturday and ended on a Saturday. Then it started on a Saturday or a Sunday and ended on a Friday. Then it ended on a Thursday. Now it's starting on Friday and it's ending on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it's just 2 days long. And they've actually even rebranded it, too. It's called the Proclaim Conference. And this year's topic is actually called The World on Edge, where we're going to be looking at kind of the global transitions that are happening, the changes that are happening globally to help you see that God's plan is not thwarted. I always love that about the Apostle Paul. When you get to Romans 11, I really think his big argument is, hey, I know it doesn't seem like it's the way that you thought it would be, but that doesn't mean God's plan is thwarted. And so when you're looking at what's going on in the world, the transitions that are happening, all the things that are going on globally, that doesn't mean God's not in control. And that's what this whole thing is about.
100%.
The world on
You
edge.
and I actually have message 4 and message 8 of the 8 messages, except that I'm going to be in Winona Lake. You're not going to be in Winona Lake.
That's
and
right.
You are going to be in September in Lancaster, and I'm not going to be in Lancaster. So you and I have the same 4 and 8 messages.
That's right. And so because we have the same messages, I'm actually just going to steal right from you. Okay?
Take whatever you want. The blind will lead the blind.
But I will miss our time at Winona Lake. Hey, listen, if you are in the Tampa area, Tampa, Florida area, the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area, or in the Winona Lake, Warsaw, Indiana area, I encourage you to go to foi.org, and there you can find out about our Proclaim conferences, where we proclaim biblical truth about Israel and the Messiah and what's going on globally in the world as well from a biblical perspective. So I encourage you to go to foi.org to find out how you can get involved. And also, just a fresh reminder, the Jew and Gentile podcast, if you're new, if you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome. Hey, the Jew and Gentile podcast is actually sponsored by FOI Equip, Steve, where you get to learn the Bible from a Jewish perspective. And I think it's so important, Steve, as you study through the scriptures to understand the Bible, that it's a Jewish book. When people say, what do you mean by a Jewish perspective? It's because I don't think most Christians stop for a moment and get the Bible out that they take to church, or the digital Bible, or the Bible that they read during Sunday school, or their small group, or their devotions, or wherever. They don't stop and think, oh, wait a minute. This is a Jewish book through and through. From Genesis to Revelation, it is Jewish. And what we're going to even talk about today, the Tefillin, the Tallit, these are all things that Jesus would have donned in his lifetime. Where did all that come from? Why is it important? We have to know these things. And that's why FOI Equip is a great resource for learning the Bible from a Jewish perspective.
No question, Chris. It's really exciting to be able to do. And wait a minute. This is the last week for Tim.
That's right. Tim Harrison has been teaching early heroes of church history, and those people who helped define the orthodox doctrines that we believe in as Christians. Some things I was thinking about it as Tim was teaching. There are things that we just take advantage of. We take advantage of the fact that we believe that Jesus was both 100% God and 100% man. And we just take, oh yeah, that's what we believe. But people had to fight for those truths in the early church. And so Tim's been walking us through some great heroes of early church history to help us understand where our orthodox principles, our doctrine comes from, about who Jesus is, about what the scriptures teach, and things of that nature. So that's a great way to connect people to the FOI Equip.
100%. We have a text number that people can contact us, 424-444-1948.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because I actually got a text the other day, and
Somebody was texting us. That's a first.
Well, number one, a lot of people had opinions about bed rotting. Last week we had talked about bed rotting. Do you remember that?
I do.
Bed rotting is a Gen Z. They're saying a Gen Z thing where they people feel like self-care. They work so hard, they work so much that they need some self-care. So what do? They lay in bed all day long with their cell phone.
And there was a picture in that article of a girl in bed with empty Tupperware with food still in it and drinks. And,
and she's just on her
she's
phone.
there all day.
Rotting away. And so somebody wrote bed rotting. Oy vey. My cousin's daughter does this often. She calls it taking to the bed. And she, and she has a 5-year-old daughter. So that was one. Let's see. That's a
What's
question.
that kid doing all day?
Here's another one. This guy and I went back and forth. He says bed rotting is ugly. Kids nowadays are so quote unquote busy. A microwave meal is too much work for them. That was a good one. That comes from the 846 area code. Another person said, someone embracing the verb rotting unto themselves is just another sign of the times. Calling bad good and Western society turned over to the debased minds, idleness, seduction, decadence, indulgence, and all the other stuff. So that comes from 618. We had a great conversation about this guy and I back and forth about bed rotting. But that's interesting because I do always, he brings up a great word here, decadence. You know, I always think a lot of our problems in American society is also the thing that we love about American society, and that is money, money, money. When you have money and you have wealth, you are the richest country in the world. Well, then guess what that means? People can you have the decadence, the opulence to be able to lay around in bed all day long and no one's going to go looking for you. If you didn't, society needs you if you don't have a lot of money. You got to be out there farming, tilling, whatever to survive. But hey, look when everything's taken care of for you, you have the freedom to just lay around all day, and bed rot.
Well, Chris, I watched a video yesterday and I thought it was a joke, but then somebody said, no, it wasn't a joke. It was a gal who was doing this herself. She was taping herself, and she said, I just want to give a shout out that I have lateness syndrome, and people are unreasonable to me. I have lateness syndrome. I can't get to work on time.
Lateness syndrome.
It's lateness syndrome. And I thought it was a joke. And then somebody, no, there's articles written about it. This person says they're against me because I have lateness syndrome.
Oh my! I've actually but in the past, whenever it comes to me driving and my kids in the car, Steve, it was always my daughter was always the oldest. She's 12, and so she'd sit in the front seat, and the twins and Levi would sit in the back. But now the twins are getting older, so I've instituted a new policy, and the policy is this: first come, first serve for the oldest 3. And my daughter, she's like, she doesn't know what to do with herself because she used to just be able to come out whenever she wanted and sit in the front seat and the boys were in the back. Well, now guess what? The twins will race each other early in the morning. It's great. It's like
they
capitalism.
Want shotgun then,
oh,
huh?
they do. It's capitalism for the front seat. Who can get there earliest, all of it, and schmooze their way right up to the top. My daughter gets in this morning. She goes, this is out of control. I'm always late. I'm always going to be in the back. I said,
she has lateness syndrome.
He's telling me.
It's an illness, Chris.
She has lateness syndrome.
You gotta treat her well. Olive, you have lateness syndrome.
That's right. We need to help her out. We got to get her going. Hey, listen, this is a question that came in through our text line. And again, it's 424-444-1948. If you have a question for Steve, I'm always going to throw him right to Steve because he's our Jewish sage. But this is a good one here, Steve. This comes from our Texas friends in 972 area code that says, what is the difference between the translated bodies of Enoch and Elijah and the new bodies of the raptured saints now in the grave?
Hey, that's a good question.
It's a great question.
There is nothing in the text that I'm aware of except the person of God. If he called them up, they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't, do you know of a place where it talks about their bodies now?
Well, that's the thing is that to me, there's two things going on here. We're talking about Enoch and Elijah are two people who we believe were living breathing, and then God caught them
They caught them up.
That's right. And then the other component is the fact that those who are dead and buried will also rise.
But
so
they're different.
they're different, but they're also the same. One's just dead and one's alive, but they all they all accomplish the same task. That's
100%.
I always call the rapture, because I think the rapture has gotten a bad name, because it's been, people they go, oh, the rapture. I see it in their eyes. They go to the Left Behind series. People my age too, oh yeah, I grew up in a church that believed in the rapture, that kind of thing. To me, it's the resurrection of the church. And what does that mean? These are believers, whether they're alive and walking around or dead. They all accomplish the same thing. The rapture actually comes from the Greek word harpazo, which is to snatch up, but a violent
Yep.
snatching.
Mm-hmm.
And the picture there to me is that it doesn't matter if you're dead or alive, because that's the question. Well, what happens to the dead? If I'm alive and Jesus comes, what about the dead people? Well, no matter what happens, they're going to either come out of the grave or they're going to be alive, and they're all going to accomplish the same thing. They're going to be resurrected, and they will meet the Lord in the air. They will be harpazo, raptured up. So whenever people say, there's no rapture in the Bible, no, you're right. They're right. The word is not in there.
No, the word's not there, but
the Greek word is.
Jesus was raptured.
That's true.
He was resurrected, and then I
Caught
love
up.
the angel. I would have been, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I'd be looking up like this, and then the angel kind of yells at him.
I know.
Why are you guys looking up?
Why do you?
He's going up. They didn't see any cables.
No, the best is he says, why are you marveling at this? Why?
Why? Are you looking at this? No, he was snatched up. Elijah snatched up.
Mm-hmm.
There's countless examples of that. And then in the future, there are going to, not just the rapture, the two witnesses. They're there, they die, and then people are celebrating, giving gifts, and then they stand up. First, they stand up. They're lying on the ground, then they stand up, and then they're taken up.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So is there what's the difference? That's the thing. I don't think there is a difference. I do believe that there is whether they're dead or alive. The point is that Paul is saying you don't have to fear whether you're dead or alive, because you will all be resurrected and caught up to meet Christ in the air. That's what I believe.
What a day it will be.
I hope that answers our question for our 972 area code. Again, if you've got any questions, comments, concerns, anything you'd like to throw Steve's way when it comes to Jewish culture and customs, biblical prophecy, any of it, you can contact us at 424-444-1948.
Give us an update on the mug on a mug. We were there. What's the update? When could we have them available to the 7 listeners who we have?
Well, I don't know when we're going to have them available, but we are working with a company right now, Daveco.
Give a shout out to Daveco.
Daveco. We drove all the way out from New Jersey to Lancaster to Amishtown, and a big swag factory. It was amazing. They do printings, all this stuff. And so we found our mug. We have our picture. So now we're sending it in to get processed, placed on the mug, and I don't know when it will come, but we're going to be ordering them. So mug on a mug is in the works, Steve. It's happening. Your dreams are coming true.
I've been dreaming about this for a long time. I want to have a cup of coffee with Jew and Gentile on the mug.
Okay, I like it. So we'll have our mug on a mug coming. Oh, and Steve left that place. He's like, I want shirts. I want this. I want mugs. Steve has got the big vision. I love it. So it was exciting going in there.
It was great. It was really. Claire was fantastic. His son Chris.
Yep.
They treated us well.
Big shout out to Daveco and Claire and Chris.
Yeah. It was great. And I just the 7 listeners are entitled to a mug.
100%. So that mug on a mug is coming again. 424-444-1948.
Real
Shoot us a
quick,
text.
Chris. I want our listeners to text us what, besides the picture of you and I on the mug, what would they want? What saying would they want on the other side?
Okay. Yeah, there you go. 424-444-1948. Okay, so Steve, before we get to that, you wanted to share something from Did You Know?
Yeah, we haven't done Emily Stone in a while.
I know, we've been talking about Jewish life after death.
Yeah,
so.
So Emily wrote here on page 121, I loved you, Jew, just the way you are. A sampling of famous intermarriages. Now, this is dated. This book, did you know, comes from around 2010. It was published. And she's going back to some of Jewish people, not just the Bible Jewish people, but in American culture at least. So, Moses, a Jew. The Cushite woman, not a Jew. King David, a Jew. Daughter of King Geshur, not a Jew. Esther, a Jew, and Ahasuerus, king of Persia, not a Jew. Guinevere Halevi, Jew. Opera composer George Bizet, not a Jew.
That's a big jump from Ahasuerus and Esther.
Sammy Davis Jr., best Jew ever, she says. She puts in parentheses, best Jew ever, and Swedish actress May Britt, not a Jew.
And her last name was Britt.
Britt.
Oh, okay. Not like a Brit Milah.
No. Oh, man. That would have made her Jewish.
Yeah.
Ben Stiller, Jew. An actress, Christine Taylor, not a Jew. George Burns, Jew. Gracie Allen, not a Jew. Lauren Bacall, Jew. Humphrey Bogart, not a Jew. Woody Allen, Jew. Sun Yi Priven, not a Jew. Jon Stewart, Jew. And Tracy McShane, not a Jew.
Okay.
Next time we do it, Chris.
Wait, I got one more. Steve Herzig, Jew.
No,
Alice Herzig,
not a Jew.
Even though we were saying this morning that Alice Herzig is probably
more Jewish than I am.
You're the Shiksa. That's
No, the Shagets.
You're the Shagets.
Oh, Gentile man. A Shiksa is a girl, and a Shagets is a guy.
You're the Shagets.
Compared to her, no question about it.
I love it. All right, well, Steve, this is a great time for us to move to what are the Tallit and the Tefillin. Let me read this section from our blog that you can catch at foi.org. And it says this: daily at first light, except on Sabbath and the holy days, Orthodox males, and in some cases females, don the traditional religious garb, all making sure to put the items in just the right place, in just the right order. Each worship experience serves as an opportunity to identify afresh with their people and their God. This is big. Actually, Steve, this is really big because I've been reading a book about, Jewish identity. Circumcision plays a major role in Jewish identity. Sabbath, people don't realize it, but the idea of taking off for a day, Friday night into Saturday night, and, even it doesn't matter the quality of it. It just, that's what this writer was saying. It doesn't matter how detailed it is. The fact that you're stopping for a night and you're giving God the honor. Some Orthodox are very intense about it, and some, more conservative and religious, not so, not as much. But the fact that you're stopping is an identifying factor that you are Jewish. There's a line that I was reading that said something. It was the Sabbath that has carried the Jews throughout history. The idea that what has maintained an identifying factor of Jewish people is keeping the Sabbath, but that even keeping these elements that we were talking about here, the Tallit, the religious garb, are identifying factors of Jewish people. And when people see these things, they know right away, oh, that person's Jewish.
And it does what, Chris? It sets us apart.
That's right.
And it's felt. It's felt for the people who look at it, but it's also felt for the person. They know if you're in a minority position, which Jewish people are in the diaspora, they're always in a minority position. The one thing you want usually when you're in the minority is you want to be stealth. You just don't want people to know because you're different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what Jewish people are commanded to do is, you're different and you are in the minority, but it doesn't matter where you are. Just like when Daniel was taken captive, you got to pray 3 times. They pass a law not to pray. What does he do? He knows that people are looking at him in part because he is the second in command. What does he do? He throws open the windows so that everybody can see. And I'm telling you, just identity-wise, when Jewish men went into the army, especially in World War II, and they were in the same barracks, the Jewish men were marked out.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yep.
Every single time. And all kinds of stuff is said and talked about. Fights happen just because they're different. Or they take the time for Shabbat to whatever degree. Or they push aside pork when everybody's eating it. And it's always that identifying factor. And you as a Jewish person have to tough it out,
Yep.
or you just, as many people, you wimp out. It's true, and I've done both growing up. You just don't want people to laugh at you. You don't want people to say, what's going on? And on the other hand, there's times you stand proud. The idea is to be consistent. God marked us out. And that's why that first paragraph is the way it is. And isn't it interesting, Chris, that as believers, the one thing we don't want, I think I could say this, most people don't want to make waves.
Nope.
But we are increasingly living in a culture where you have to make decisions, sometimes multiple decisions in a single day. And sometimes you could stand proud or stand tall, and other times you wimp out. But it all revolves around, is this what I am? Is this what I believe? And I have to demonstrate that in some way. Back in the day when I was a young Christian in the late 70s and early 80s, they used to do what's called door-to-door ministry. It's hard to imagine today with a stranger knocking on the door that you...
They got the cameras on the doorbells now.
Yeah. But back then, there were people in churches, when they did this door-to-door ministry, they would see a mezuzah on the door and say, well, we don't have to go there. They're Jewish. And so they move on. But the Jewish person was saying, a Jewish person lives here. Identify. I agree with you. That is a very important aspect today, and it was in the Bible as well.
You know, the quote, the Sabbath quote I was talking about, I had said it wrong. It was, the Jews didn't keep the Sabbath has kept the Jews. And the idea of carrying them through history is an identifying marker that we are who we are because God commanded us to rest on this day. And so it actually, what we're going to show you today, the Tallit and the Tefillin, it's not just something that's absolutely made up out of the blue in rabbinic Judaism. It's grounded in the Torah. It's grounded in
100%.
the Bible. And it says this comes from Deuteronomy, I believe, chapter 6. But it says, speak to the children of, this is Numbers 15, 38, and 40 through 40. It says, speak to the children of Israel, tell them to make tassels on the corner of their garments throughout their generations, and to put blue thread in the tassels of the corners. And you shall have the tassel, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and that you may not follow the harlotry to which your own heart and your own eyes are inclined, and that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy for your God. So, you know, when you see Jewish people, this moment that they're talking about these tassels with blue thread, this has a name, and Jewish people wear them. So maybe you could share the name.
Sure.
You could show it.
We're talking about the Tallit, Chris. And the Tallit actually is the garment that holds the fringes, or the tassels, if you will.
Yep. So, Steve, if you're watching on YouTube, online, Steve is showing you're putting it on. You're donning the religious.
That's right. Chris, if for those listeners, all 7 of you who've been to, if you have been to the wall, the Western Wall, you might see some of the men and, well, none of the women at the wall, but in synagogues, they'll put the Tallit over their head like this and let it, so that you're focused straight ahead. You can't get distracted to your right or to your left. The idea is we're about to go to prayer. We concentrate. Prayer is a concentrate. Have you ever said a quick prayer,
Oh,
Chris?
yeah.
We do it here sometimes.
Yeah.
We always want to pray before one of these podcasts, but some are longer than others, right, Chris?
Well, and I even when we go to the Western Wall in Jerusalem, and you can see Jewish people wearing these in other ways too, but they do a sometimes the ultra Orthodox will go back and forth davening. And I asked them, why do you do that? And they go, to stay focused. It helps us stay focused when you're moving, and you can stay focused on praying.
I call it chuckling. It drives Alice crazy. There's something within the DNA of especially Ashkenazi Jews. Even when we're sitting, I take my leg and I move it up and down real fast, and it vibrates. And when we're in a church service, Alice will look over to me the whole Will you stop it?
Oh yeah, your leg starts jittering. Yeah.
So yeah, we move, we go back and forth, and then there's actually in the liturgy, there's times you're to go up and down, but then there's times you bow down, and various texts indicate that that's what you should do. But the Tallit carries the fringes, and Chris, there's evidence in the text that there was an outer garment that Jesus wore that had the fringes. Do you remember?
I do. That was the Syrophoenician woman.
That's right. And she touched the hem of his garment. That's exactly what the Tallit has. The hem of his garment and the fringes are at the edge of the garment.
So that's what she would have grabbed there when he said, that was also the same account when he says, I feel my power draining out.
Something's gone here. Yeah. Something's happening. And so, Chris, the colors remind us of something in relation to Israel today.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's the flag. The flag has that blue and white.
In fact, if you hold it up this way,
it does look like
put a Jewish star on it.
That's a great point. Is that what it comes from?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
It's like a mini, no fringes.
They should have put fringes on it. That would have really stood out.
That would have been the old flag with fringes.
They're trying to stand out, you know.
But the idea is what evidently the designers did is they said, hey, let's take what's identifying us in public all the time when we worship and put it on the flag. And they added the Star of David, and it's distinct. It's especially when you see other flags. A lot of flags look the same. They're different colors, but if you have a background of all the different flags of nations, some of them kind of run together. But Israel's really stands out. I'm not saying it's the most unique, but it is out there.
Can we also go back to the fringes? Are there 613 of them? Can you describe that?
Yes, there's there's 4 longer fringes that actually talk about from the 4 corners of the earth, wherever we are, and then there's little fringes, and when you add them all up, all the knots, which are all hand done, that's why Tallit could be very expensive. It adds up to 613. 613 mitzvot. We've talked about that word here on the podcast. Mitzvot are the commandments. There's commandments thou shalt and commandments thou shalt not. And the thou shalt not are 365, I believe. One for every day of the year corresponds. And 248 thou shalts. And so, Chris, for me, that's part of my testimony. Think of that, 613. We talk about the 10 commandments. Those are the first 10.
Yeah.
Those are 10.
They're the bullet points.
100%. Look, I'd flunk the first 10. Everybody, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's no one. The only human being who was able to keep the law was also, as you started our podcast, he's God himself. He's man, but he's God. And he was the only one. He was able to fulfill the law. He's the writer of the law. He fulfilled the law. He was the only man who was able to do that because he is wholly righteous. But the law taught me sin. That's because God is holy and we are not.
And you know, the whole point of the Tallit, what we're looking at here is, you know, I think a lot of times can go, oh, that's old Judaism. You know, it's in the past. You know, it's done, and it's true. That's the way Jewish people worshiped, and they still worship today. But there is something that's very important about it, and that is the fact that it as it says in the text here. It says, you shall have the tassel that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them. And so the whole point of the prayer shawl, what you put on, is to remember. You're taking a moment to stop and to remember God's commandments, and there are 613 of them. But that doesn't make it a bad thing.
No, the law is holy, just, and good.
That's right. And it's it was important for people to have things that you would remember by. We have something that we remember the Lord by. It's do this in remembrance of me. It's the Lord's Supper, taking the bread and the cup. We do these things not because we believe Jesus is in the bread and Jesus is in the cup, but he's telling us, take these items, which were connected to the Passover, and remember me through them, my shed blood, my broken body. And when you put that on, when a Jewish person puts that on, I don't know what's going on in their brain or in their heart, but the intention that should be there is one of remembering God's holy law, God's holy commandments, his Torah. And so that's important. It actually had a purpose. It wasn't just to be ritualistic. It was to remember.
Oh, Chris, we had to dress to worship. That's a concept that today in the United States is not, nobody does that. But there was a day in our culture, 30 to 50 years ago and before, that when you went to worship, you dressed for it. It was a special time. And so I know in synagogue, I dressed in my Tallit. I had a yarmulke. We'll talk about that at another podcast. You put on the garb for worship. But Chris, I couldn't go into the auditorium, the synagogue worship center, where the bima is, where you step up on a platform, and where the ark, where they keep the holy Torah, the scrolls. I couldn't go in there with shorts on and flip-flops.
You know what's
they
funny?
Might do that now. It's actually been a little while since I've been at a Shabbat service. But I know growing up, there was no way I could do that. You had to dress up, and it marked. That was part of the thing you had to do.
You write this in your. It's a blog, but it comes from your book, Jewish Culture and Customs. You wrote, originally worn as an outer garment, today it's primarily worn by men and women in Reformed congregations as a prayer shawl during public and private worship. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. It's part of, again, what you talked about, the identifying factor that Jewish people have. In Jesus's day, it was an outer garment. That's what they wore from their neck down, and the fringes would hang down. Where over time, and the diaspora and things changed, dress changed, and Jewish people became more assimilated in the culture where they were, except when it came time to worship. And they have the Tallit, the shawl, if you will. They place it over. It's supposed to be the man who does it, but Reform, Judaism, conservative Jewish women felt left out and wanted to be part of it. And so many congregations who have women rabbis now, they will also put on the Tallit, but it's an outward sign. This is worship. This is, we have the shawl off. We're talking, we're kibitzing, we put the shawl on. It's time to worship.
Now, in Orthodox world, you say many observant Jews wear a talit katan, a small talit, under the shirt, and I've seen this before, so that the fringes may be displayed at all times. I see this especially when we go to Brooklyn with our encounter group and we hang out with our Orthodox Jewish friends up there. You can't see the undergarment because it's covered by, but you see the tzitzit, the
tzitzit are there as the main. That's the main thing. Why you just talked about it, Chris. The 613. When you see those fringes, you know that person, first of all, they're Jewish. Secondly, they're observant.
Yeah.
And you know that the law means something. I mean, really extraordinarily means something. They're striving. They're telling you by this, the Talit Katan you put on, let's say you wear an undershirt first. Then you put this garment over. It has two fringes on the front, two fringes on the back. You can tuck your shirt in, but you leave the fringes exposed so that it's a outward display of who you are. Chris, you're a Gentile. You're leading mostly Gentiles. There's a Jewish guy. He's observant. You know right away. Yep. He's identifying himself.
There's another identifier, too, and maybe it's a good time to talk about this because when you go to Israel, the idea of being secular and religious is it's a little bit different than America, because you can believe in a God, but it might not be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that might even just label you into the secular world. But a religious person is somebody who believes in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and if they're not ultra orthodox, you can pinpoint them right away. But let's just say they're religious and they do their daily job. They usually wear a yarmulke on top of their head. In Israel, that's a good sign that they are religious when they wear a yarmulke. And you've got your
I got
yarmulke.
a few of them, Chris.
Oh, you got a couple.
Yeah, let's see.
Is this a Boston Red Sox?
Yeah, that's from Alice's brother. He gave that. He's lives in
Now
Connecticut.
you got your Scottish one?
I got this from John McKim.
Yeah, Scottish.
And here's another one.
Oh, another Scottish one.
That's right. That's right. And what else do I have in here? I think. Oh, this is the one I got from. I think Jonathan was traveling in Europe and got me that.
Your son?
Yep, when he was in this.
All right, we're up to four. We're up to four.
Here's another one from John Wegner.
All right, another Boston Red Sox one.
Yeah, and then I got this, and then I got this. That's it. That's
Okay.
That's all there is.
All right, so we the yarmulke or kippah.
Kippah. Yep. Yarmulke is Yiddish, and kippah is Hebrew.
And so you can say either one interchangeably.
All the time they do.
But a yarmulke is something that's also designed to mark a Jewish person.
Right. It takes your bald spot right out.
Yeah.
Look, I'll show you.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I'll
Put
show
one
you.
on there.
See, I'm bald up at the top.
Yeah, you got some balding.
Put that baby on there.
Can't
and
even
it
notice.
looks like you got hair.
That's right. You're honoring God, and you got your hair
there
covered.
you go.
But there is a religious ritual component to it, that you're honoring God by covering your head. You're saying you're under the authority of God.
And that's the key, Chris, right there. Yarmulkes came after the Apostle Paul, who wrote to men that you need your head uncovered.
Mm-hmm.
So people are saying, oh, you see, Paul's going against his own background, and he's against all that stuff. Well, the problem is there was no yarmulke in his day.
It wasn't defined at that point.
It came much later. And when it came for a purpose. I don't know of what council. There probably wasn't a council, but there was a meeting. The Jewish men were lording power over their wives. Mm-hmm. They were big shots. They were machers. We use that. We had that word as one of our Yiddish words. They're big shots. Mm-hmm. And so the rabbi said, we got to find a way to make sure that they realize that their God-given authority is over their families. But they need to be reminded that someone is higher than them, that they are under, as it were, the head, they're under God. And so the yarmulke, again, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, when you went into a public government building, you took your hat off. Men wore fedoras back in when I was real little. I remember a very... well-dressed man had his suit and had his hat. It was part of being a well-dressed person. The idea of baseball caps, the way we wear them all the time, not done that many years ago, except for Jewish men. A Jewish man could go into a government building and he would not take his hat off. And once he did that, it marked them out. And sometimes to the chagrin of all the Gentiles are, oh yeah, he's Jewish.
It's got yeah.
So it's a mark again. It's the idea of being set apart. It's the idea that we are a different people. Mm-hmm. And Chris, I brings a question. We rebel against being different. Growing up, when I went to school, you wanted to blend, at least me, you wanted to blend in. Is it good to be different? And is it easy to be different?
No, and that's the tough part about being a Christian today in our society is I think we've grown up for a very long time in a country that has the stream of culture and the Christian way of life flowed in one direction. Within the past few decades, the stream has started going in the opposite direction, and Christians are starting to look very different. And to be different is to be loud and, in some cases, for those people, extreme. You hear those people. Oh, they're the extreme right wing. well, really, they're just talking about things that might have not, been that way 50 years ago or 40 years ago, but they are countercultural to what's going on. I think Christianity and Judaism has always been designed to be countercultural. And so it is hard to be that way. And I think the church is wrestling with this right now. How much of the culture do we embrace? And how much of the culture do we have to say, this can't come in to the confines of the church or into the confines of Judaism as well, in the Jewish faith, that you get the same problem I think that the church has. In Judaism, there are more reformed, liberal, open-minded synagogues that just go right along with the culture, where the Orthodox are totally different, or even the conservative are totally different. The same can be said in churches. Those who hold fast to the scriptures and what the scriptures teach make sure that the culture doesn't change the church. The church has always been this way, and it must remain true to the Word of God. And so because of that, we are different, and it's always been that way.
I think it's a good segue, Chris. I know you have lined up YouTube that we want to show, and it's John Lennox, who's a brilliant scientist, mathematician, and a God-fearer, a Christian, and he defends the belief in God, and he often is debating atheists. Mm-hmm. And I ran across this YouTube, and they're both English. Both the atheist and John is actually, I think he's Irish, but they're both distinguished, educated men.
They just sound smart.
I love both of them, the way they argue. I argue, what?
Yeah.
And my arms they're so calm. Anyway, this particular video, I think, just captures really the ethos of what we're struggling with in a culture. On one side is the atheist, very well educated, and how does he look at those who believe in God? Primitive, uneducated, simple-minded.
Well, you're even saying his premise, because we're not going to play the whole thing, but his premise is that, hey, had there been science first, there would have been no need for religion.
Exactly, and he's saying science has had a hard time overcoming the primitive traditions and superstitious activities of religion. If it were the other way around, it would have been much better. Mm-hmm. And so John Lennox is listening to about a 3.5-minute, very calm, I love the accent, sounds wonderful. And then finally he's given an opportunity, and here's what he says.
Peter, we can't reverse history, as you say, but we can reverse it on the personal level. There's a book sitting right there called The Language of God by Francis Collins. He started off in atheism. His slate was written on by atheism to start with. And he came to the conclusion, as people like C.S. Lewis did, and Alistair McGrath, who was here, did, and many other people did, that the evidence for God is so strong that they abandoned their atheism. And I have seen this happen in colleagues and friends of mine. So I just think your argument doesn't hold water. The issue for all of us is what is true.
Yeah, but in that case, it's early stage senility, I think.
But it's very easy to write it off like that. If I just said that was the same of atheism, you want
but
comfort.
Not. I mean, no. But what comfort does atheism give you?
It gives you the comfort that you never have to meet God.
That's the key line.
That is the key line. I just thought that was, and look, if you're watching the video, that makes John Lennox lean. If you look at body language, that is because
he leans
you never
right in.
have to meet God.
Yep.
And that's it.
Yep.
That's it.
That was a good one when you showed that we wanted to air it because it does show it's to be a faithful follower of God is to be counterculture. You cannot simply embrace the world system. There are even in Christianity, we are grace oriented, but that still doesn't mean that we do whatever we want. In fact, it actually means that we don't want to abuse grace. There's a way that we walk by. We've mentioned this before in past podcasts, Steve, is that, Paul says you should walk in this manner. That is a very Jewish concept to walk. It comes, the Hebrew word is halak, which means to walk. And that's where Jewish people have a term that they use for laws. It's called halakhic laws, walking laws. And what is it? It's not that you actually are walking, it's your behavior. It's the way that you act. And in fact, a lot of halakhic laws for Jewish people were organized and created when they were living outside of the land of Israel. So they had to learn as a Jewish person, how do I maintain my Jewish identity and my faith in God in a world that is absolutely countercultural and different than who I am, just as Daniel was in Nebuchadnezzar's court. How do I maintain my Jewish identity, my faith in God, when everything else is telling me to do the opposite? And so a lot of the halakhic laws, the walking laws, were created during this time. They show up in the Mishnah and they show up in the Talmud, which is just a furtherance of the Mishnah. It's commentary on the law. It's law commentary. All of
we love commentaries.
Oh yeah, we just got tons of commentaries. In fact, I think we have some scattered in our bookshelves here. But the point I'm trying to make is that we have our own sets of, as Christians, we live by grace, but we have also been commanded to follow God's commands that are in the New Testament. And they don't, I don't believe they simply erase what was going on in the Old Testament, but that there is a new command that Jesus gives us to love each other. But all of it stems from the way that we treat one another and we love one another. But it's not as though we just get off free and we can go do whatever we want. We live by grace, but there are still ways that we walk in order to be pleasing to the Lord. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that makes us different. It marks us as different right away. And in fact, when Gentiles came into the church in Acts chapter 15, they were marked different. They didn't have to be Jewish. That's the point. Okay, fine. Gentiles don't have to be Jewish, but they still have to do some Jewish things. They have to abstain from sexual immorality. That's if you're a pagan and you've been going to the temple your whole life of some pagan god and doing some unkosher things at that temple when it comes to sexual immorality, you got to stop that now. Now, that's a big cultural change.
Big cultural change.
And the other thing is actually adopting not kosher food laws, but certain aspects of the type of food that you can eat. So there were little tiny, moments where the Gentiles did have to change the ways that they were in the past in order to have fellowship with Jewish people in the church. In Acts chapter 15. This is big because you're actually asking those Gentiles, look, you don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to keep all the festivals, but you do. You do have to do these certain things that will mark you as different from the rest of the world that you've grown up in.
And Chris, how many testimonies have you heard? And mine is one of them, but how many have you heard where it was somebody who was living the life that caught the attention of someone else and was the impetus for them to search because there's something different? To me, the ultimate compliment to any Christian is if a non-believer says, there's something different about you.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you tick? I've heard people, as I've had opportunity to travel in churches, people have come up to me and said, yep, there was a person in my life. First, I thought they were kind of crazy. They were this, they were that. They were different, and I wanted what they have.
Yep.
And isn't the good news is they can have it?
They can have it. It's free. It is free.
Boy, that alone is good. but it was costly, wasn't it?
It was very.
It took the blood of Christ, his death, but it's free for us. He paid it all.
And if you're living in a culture that is completely, think about the Apostle Paul. I actually think a lot of the Apostle Paul's life is trying to mimic what the suffering that Jesus went through. He didn't try to just go off into the Mediterranean and take a cruise ship to the nice areas of Rome. No, he was in jail for 2 years for his faith. I mean, he was constantly beaten and shoved away. He faced great persecution for what he believed. And that was in two different cultures. That was in the pagan culture he went into as an apostle to the Gentiles. And then it was in his own Jewish culture. He was being pushed away and persecuted for what he believed. And so he faced it from both sides. But still, if you think about that, that means that he was being countercultural to the pagan world, and even countercultural in some way to the Jewish world that he was, I don't want to say he was criticizing. He was just announcing the Messiah has come. So
100%. Next podcast, we'll talk about the Tefillin, talk about really being marked out. How about being on a LL flight or a United or American flight, and you're on your way from New York to Israel, and the sun is going to be coming up, and you got to put on your tefillin, and you're 30,000 feet up, and there's all these people in the plane, and you're Jewish and observant. What do you do, Chris?
But you got to pray. You got to pray. And you know what you got to do? You might have to tap on a few shoulders. Are you Jew? Can I wake you up? Are you Jewish?
We need a minion.
That's right. No, we'll look at that, and we'll look at a mezuzah next week as well. So be sure to come back for that. We are going to be moving to the news, Steve, and you found this one that I thought was so interesting. Doctors reattach boy's head after car accident thanks to an amazing surgery. Doctors and it happened in Israel. Doctors at Israel's Hadassah Medical Center perform a miraculous surgery. Steve, why don't you talk about this?
I mean, headlines get to me. Whoever that's the purpose of a headline, especially when you're online. I scroll around looking just for my own amusement, sometimes for the podcast, just looking. And when you see, I thought, doctors reattached. That means it wasn't attached.
Yeah.
They reattached his head. And then you read the article. So this is coming from Fox News. But what's interesting is it's a 12-year-old boy. His name is Suleiman Hassan. He's 12 years old. He lives in the West Bank. And he was riding his bike when a car hit him. A car hit him. He's rushed to Hadassah Medical Center and immediately put into surgery in the trauma unit. And Dr. Ohad Einav, the orthopedic specialist, led the operation, said the procedure took several hours. You think?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I thought maybe several days.
Yeah, well, we did it in 10 minutes.
He says, our ability to save the child was thanks to our knowledge and the most innovative technology in the operating room, Einav said, adding that the team fought for the boy's life. In fact, Chris, Hassan, after the operation, he only had a 50% chance of surviving. But what happened?
Oh, he survived. Well, and actually, you had mentioned that they didn't originally share this because they didn't know what the outcome would be. But now that he's in safe territory, the operation occurred in June, but doctors waited a month to announce the results. The hospital recently discharged Hassan with a cervical splint and will continue to monitor monitor the boy. The fact that such a child has no neurological defects or sensory or motor dysfunction, and that he is functioning normally and walking without an aid after such a long process is no small thing. You think?
100%. The father. This is in Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. He's a Palestinian boy. The father never left his son's side once the procedure was done. He says, quote, "Bless you all. Thanks to you, he regained his life even when the odds were low and the danger was obvious. What saved him were professionalism, technology, quick decision-making by the trauma and orthopedics team. And the father is most grateful. And here was the key to the surgery, they said, preserving blood flow to the brain. This is long out of my area. And anyway,
you're a vlogger and a blogger. You're not a doctor.
Nothing. I got bupkis. It sounds like from the story that the major blood vessels were likely not severed, and that this involved orthopedic rebuilding, probably using rods and reattaching ligaments and possibly bone grafts and implants.
This comes from that incredibly racist racist and what do they call that? From South America.
Apartheid.
Apartheid country, Israel, who hates the Palestinians and doesn't care about them and their well-being. Here is two Israeli doctors, an entire hospital, Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem, serving a Palestinian kid. And listen,
getting the most expert care. And by the way, we commend. This is good. We're not. Yeah, we're not joking. We're not saying this in a bad way. No. They care about the life of the person. And Chris, how often have we read news stories where a terrorist who blows themselves up, male or female, and it doesn't kill them, next to the surgical room is next to the victim as they operate on the one who did it. It happens many, many times. How about in north in the Golan, where a civil war was going on and there are casualties? they fly them into Israel.
That's right.
The two, both enemies of Israel, and they take care of them.
They set up field hospitals up there as well. So, Steve, if I want to encourage our listeners to come to Israel with us, because there's amazing sites that you can see. And one of those amazing sites that we love to visit, it's actually one of my favorite places to go, is Caesarea by the Sea. Caesarea by the Sea is an artificial port that Herod the Great built in the 1st century BC, leading up to the birth of Christ. And it was a very pagan town. You know, we talked about culture. We were talking about culture earlier. This is not the type of, when Herod built this, Caesarea...
He wasn't building it for Jews.
He was not building it for Jews. Even Peter is reluctant to go to Caesarea. But anyway, Caesarea had a very long history as a port that was built in the 1st century BC. But if you ever come to Israel with us, you'll get a chance to see the history of Caesarea in a video. And it's a 20-minute video or so, but it'll show you going from when the moment Herod built it all the way through the centuries into the early church history, all of this stuff, the Byzantine, blah, blah, blah. It keeps going on and on. But a new study came out that says this, and this comes from our friend Alan in Canada who sent this to us. Thank you, Alan. New study confirms tsunami destroyed Caesarea in the 8th century AD. She shall be, it says this from Isaiah 29, verse 6, she shall be remembered, the Lord of hosts, with roaring and shaking and deafening noise, storm and tempest, and blaze of consuming fire. That comes, that's the little verse they put with it. But it says new research indicates that a tsunami in 749 AD.
No, CE. You got to explain CE, Chris.
CE is Common Era. So
why do they do that?
Well, they because Jesus, it's too religious.
That's important.
Exactly.
That's important info. Any Jewish document you read, if it's published by Jewish people, it's going to have before BCE and
before
CE.
Before the Common Era?
Before the Common Era, instead of saying BC, before Christ, and after the Common Era, CE. So anyway, that's because I've had people come up to me, what's with these dates? I don't understand. What's this all about? Anyway,
that's right. It's the more, what they would consider the more scholarly. It's scholarly. They got rid of the AD and the BC, and they do BCE and CE. But new research indicates that a tsunami in 749 CE caused by an earthquake was the final destructive element that finished off the coastal city of Caesarea Maritima. The research will help understand how the region reacted in the past to such natural catastrophes and will also help predict future events. And this all comes from a team from the University of Haifa School of Marine Sciences. So anyway, very interesting, Steve, because you and I have marched through Caesarea. It's a national park. In fact, Caesarea today is one of the wealthiest towns in all of Israel. It's where all the
Bibi Netanyahu lives.
He has a very nice Mediterranean coastal home. It's the only town in Israel, Caesarea today, with a golf course.
100%.
So it's bougie today. And it was bougie back then too. Herod made everything bougie, and so here.
Well, the weather is spectacular there. It's just,
and the water is crystal blue.
It's very, very nice.
Now, one of my favorite things to do is to give people enough time to go around and go through Caesarea. I go to the coffee shop and get myself a cup of coffee and sit out and look over the Mediterranean. But it's got a lot of great biblical history. But this is a new study I thought was interesting.
I think it's great.
Maybe to convince some of our listeners to come to Israel with us.
You never know. And Chris, I understand that yesterday you were recording for the radio. You are our radio voice at FOI. And you finally had enough, you and the radio team, and you did a whole program on Biden and why he's so terrible. He hasn't invited Netanyahu. He's not interested. He's anti-Semitic. He's anti-Israel. And so, and by the way, at the time that you did that, there was good cause for you to do that. And I know you worked on that. You spent a lot of time. And then what happened?
Well, that was so we put the whole bit together because coming over is going to be the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, is today's the 19th. Tomorrow. So tomorrow, Wednesday, July 19th, Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, not the prime minister.
I have an I, he has an O. That's the difference.
That's right. You guys are practically family. But Isaac Herzog is like the JFK, the Herzog family in Israeli politics are like the Kennedys. They've been around for a long time. All of that. And so anyway, he's the president. That's different than the prime minister.
100%.
And so this was not originally snuff to Netanyahu, because his arrival, Isaac Herzog's arrival into Washington, D.C. this week is to commemorate the Israel's 75th anniversary. Congress wanted to do something for him. And so they didn't have a prime minister at that point. They knew there would be, they invited him back in November of last year. And so there wasn't a prime minister yet. There wasn't solidified. So they invited out Herzog. Okay. So this wasn't originally a snuff to Netanyahu, but it kind of became that way because Netanyahu became the prime minister and got bupkis from Biden.
Yeah, he's been in office now, what, 6 months, 8 months?
No phone call, no conversation, no invitation to the White House.
Bupkis,
which is a big deal because normally presidents do that with the Israeli prime ministers. And so all that to say, I had done a bit that just said Biden did not, this is an opportunity for Biden because Biden is very vocal. This is the thing I'm not a fan of. Biden is very vocal about Israeli politics. That means he's taking his opinion about Israel and publicly stating what he thinks the United States believes about what's going on in Israel with their own political divides. And so I was saying that this is an opportunity to have the president, who is supposed to technically be an apolitical figure in Israeli politics, and to be able to welcome Israel, say, I support Israel, but I don't like what your government's doing. Well, I was surprised that last night, the moment I do this whole bit, this video, this radio, the whole thing, guess what happens? Biden calls Netanyahu and says, we want you to come to Washington. So I texted Tom, a colleague here who runs the video department. I said, I think we should scratch that one because it's not true anymore. Yep. And so we want to be honest. We want to be true. So anyway.
Things change. But the article we're talking about, which just came in today, from Sharon Goodrow, who is she is a news junkie.
Oh, news junkie.
And so she's on vacation and sent me this article today while she's on vacation. Gone off a cliff. Dems grapple with anti-Semitism ahead of president's visit. Why is that? Because some people are boycotting. They're boycotting the president, who's an apolitical person, as you said.
The Israeli president.
The Israeli president. Mm-hmm. And they're boycotting him because Israel's terrible in their eyes.
The Israeli president functions a lot like King Charles in England functions. He's not in charge of the government. He doesn't have, except for approving the government that comes in. The president of Israel is simply a ceremonial position that's designed to kind of be a representation for Israel around the world. But then that's what makes it very interesting, is that this person is simply just a figurehead in Israeli for the state of Israel. And it says this, this comes from the Washington Free Beacon, Democratic leaders are rushing to combat accusations of anti-Semitism after a slew of anti-Israel comments from members of the party raised the stakes on a planned Democratic boycott of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's address to Congress. At least 4 members of the Democratic Party Progressive Squad announced that they would boycott Herzog's address to Congress this Wednesday. The group includes Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, Jamal Bowman from New York, Cory Bush, a Democrat from Montana. What's that? Missouri, and Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. And so they all plan on boycotting. They said the scrutiny this weekend for criticizing Israel, which Jayapal slammed as a, quote, racist state.
Who attaches heads to Palestinian children.
That's right. Who got run over by a car, and everybody's smiling and happy. And that's right. It's funny. It's called a racist state. You know, that's what. And so they're boycotting the Israeli president's visit.
Let's be clear, Chris, and this is fair. Are there racists in Israel?
Yes.
Yes. Are there racists in the United States?
Yes.
Yes, there are. Is the United States a racist country? No. Look at the law. The laws are designed and passed to protect people. They're not always adhered to, just like in Judaism. Mm-hmm. There's the law. God gave the law. The greatest lawgiver, the most compassionate, kind, gracious, and we break them. That doesn't make God evil. It makes the people who don't follow evil. In Israel, it's a great place to be. In fact, to back it up, they've taken surveys in what's called the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, and if the question was, if this is turned over to Palestinian Authority, which side do you want to be on? This is asking Palestinians. Before they close shop, I want to be an Israeli citizen. The majority, every time. All that's saying is that there's opportunity there. They're not racist. There's troubles. People have troubles. But no, it's not racist.
It's an interesting gone off the cliff is what it's called. We've linked that. Dems grapple with anti-Semitism ahead of Israeli president's visit, and this is big too because Israel has always been a bipartisan issue. You know, a lot of these progressive squad members, they've taken over Democratic seats that at one point were supportive of Israel. We know, they were very important figures in supporting the state of Israel. Now they've been upended, and these new squad members take over, and they actually are very, very anti-Zionist, which means they don't like Israel at all. So much so that they won't even come listen to the president's speech.
And it doesn't hurt them in their districts, which is a very dangerous sign. They're elected. They're duly elected. They're transparent about what they believe, and they continue to get the votes. What's that telling you?
We're going to have a further conversation about that because I think it's important to understand the similarities between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism.
100%.
But in light of that, Steve, Yiddish word of the day. Yiddish word of the day.
Chris, let's do the English first and why you chose it.
Okay.
The English is hole in the head.
Well, I thought hole in the head is funny. Well, it's not because what happened to this boy is funny, but I thought it was a funny connection that this poor kid, he got run over by a car and his head disconnected.
He had internal decapitation, it's called.
It was a hole in the head. And the Israeli doctors stitched it back up.
The atheist guy talking to John Lennox, he's got a hole in his head without any physical hole being there.
100%. And so the Yiddish word of the day is
luch and choup.
Luch and choup.
You got to do the choup. Luch and choup.
Okay, and that means hole in the head.
Hole in the head.
Luch and choup.
Maybe that should be one of the things on a mug and a mug. Luch and head. Who knows?
I know I've got luch and choup sometimes.
Luch and choup.
I got a hole in the head sometimes. That's good. Anyway, hey, everybody, thank you so much for listening to the Jew and Gentile podcast. Don't forget, go to foiequip.org, and there you can register for Tim Harrison's upcoming classes. Third one is final installment.
Patriarchs and Presidents coming up next.
That's right. So you can not only register for Tim Harrison's class if you haven't done already, you can sign up for Paul Scharf's class, Patriarchs and Presidents. Be sure to do that. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Hey, guess what? We'll see you next week.